There's a time for everything.
And a season for every activity under the heavens.
A time to be born.
And a time to die.
A time to plant and a time to uproot.
A time to kill and a time to heal.
A time to tear down and a time to build.
A time to weep and a time to laugh.
A time to mourn and a time to dance.
A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them.
A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing.
A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away.
A time to tear and a time to mend.
A time to be silent and a time to speak.
A time to love and a time to hate.
A time for war and a time for peace. Seasons change. God remains.
Good morning again, everybody. Welcome to Crossroads. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm here. My body doesn't exactly know what time zone it is or what continent I'm on. I don't know what meal to eat next, but I do know this. The Spirit of the Lord was here in this place this morning, and it just was fun to worship with you guys. So thanks already for making it a special morning. We're going to start this new series today, and a series of messages that will take us all the way through the month of November about different seasons. And some of you have already given input for this series on our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook. Some of you have already told us what your favorite season is. How many of you follow us on socials? A few of you? Yeah, if you're on social media, you should follow us, YouTube, Instagram, that kind of thing. And so I have the poll results here for what was your favorite season. But before we do that, because I realize some of you didn't get to vote, so I want you to turn to the person next to you and just tell them, what is your favorite season? On your mark, get set, go. All right. All right. Yep. You have to pick one. Yeah, okay. Some of you didn't play along. That's okay. All right. For all the introverts in the room, there's no more sharing that I'll ask you to do throughout the whole time. I have right here in my hand the official results. You could tell they're official because they're on a blue sticky note. That's what all official results are on. I'll start in third place. The third favorite season, as voted on our socials, was summer. Third place. I know. See, some of you are unhappy with that. You could vote next year, and then you won't be unhappy with the results. See how that works? Coming in second was spring. Spring came in second. And number one was fall. Yeah, fall was number one. And maybe that's because that's the season that we're in, and people were like, I want to be fully present, wherever I am or whatever, something like that. You know what got 0 votes? Winter. Doesn't surprise me at all. Did anybody, is winter your favorite season? Really? I'll pray for you. I don't understand you, but I'm with you, Yeah, so some people I know, my friend Kevin, his favorite season is winter, and I pray for him. It hasn't worked. So anyway, we're not talking about, we're not talking about seasons of the year necessarily, although they provide a good beginning understanding of the seasons that we experience in our lives. In our souls, we experience all kinds of seasons. In the Old Testament, the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verse 1 says this: there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. And what that's talking about there are times of joy and celebration in our lives. There are times of significant change and transition in our lives. Sometimes there's unwanted change or unexpected things that change in our lives that we have to navigate. There's seasons of loneliness, darkness. There's seasons of hope when you least expected it, of new hope and new life. And the good news is that we all experience all of them, and it doesn't matter which one you're in right now. Some of you are like seasoned schizophrenic. You do like more than one at one time. Like at work, you have one season, and then at home, you have a different season, and then something like that. And that's okay. We all experience all of them. And the good news is this: God is present in every season. In every season. Now, what we're going to try to do together is learn how to recognize and experience God's presence regardless of the season. And it's super important because God is present. Sometimes we have a hard time acknowledging, recognizing, experiencing the hand of God in every single season. So we're going to take 1 week each season. Today, you might have guessed which one we're going to start with. Winter. No, I'm just I'm teasing. Yeah, no, it's summer. Yeah. And I love summer. I didn't vote online, but I probably would have voted summer. Summer is a season of celebration, of fireworks and lemonade and going out on the bay. And summer, here's how great summer is. You know when it starts? Don't tell me June 21st either, because that's not right. I know that's the equinox and whatever. It starts whenever school stops, right? Do you remember the last day of school? That's the beginning of summer. That's such a great feeling, when you leave and you're like, sweet, I got freedom, and some of you don't remember, but go back with me. It was an awesome feeling. And so in the seasons of our soul, summer is when things are humming, things are working, relationships are good. God feels close in the season maybe of summer. But it's also, I think, the easiest season for you and I to miss. We can just miss it. And I think this happens in actual summertime sometimes, doesn't it? Like you're like, where did the summer go? It's, at the end of August, and you're like, wait a minute, it was just the 4th of July. What happened to summer? And it just zoop, and you miss it. That usually doesn't happen in winter. Am I right? I hardly ever hear anybody going like, where did the winter go? When will the cold weather, I missed it. Yeah, you're always like, when is it going to be over? But the season of celebration and joy is one that we are most prone to miss, to just not be aware of. And you think, well, what's so bad about that? What's the big deal? It is a big deal. You've maybe heard me use this quote before. There are two things that pierce the human soul, that move us more than anything else, and they are beauty and pain. And pain, we never miss. No one is ever experiencing pain and like, oh, I wasn't even aware of that. Not at all. And you don't need to look for pain. Have you noticed that? It finds you automatically as a human. But beauty is different. Sometimes we miss beauty. We just go right past it and never stop to even acknowledge it. And we just miss it. And that's a big deal. Come on. This is why you can go through 7 green lights in a row and it doesn't register with you at all. You hit 2 red lights in a row and you're like, am I right? Yeah. Like the green lights don't register at all. You're just flying along. You can get 50 compliments at work, and you get 1 criticism that was 7 months ago, and you can't get that thing out of your head. It's the summer, the celebration, the joy that we so easily can just miss. And that is more than detrimental, it's destructive to our lives. You say, oh, that seems a little destructive. A guy named Lou Smedes wrote a book about joy, and in it he said this: to miss out on joy is to miss out on the reason for your existence. Dang. Yeah. to glorify God and enjoy Him forever, the chief end of life. And we are prone to just miss it. So what I want to do today is take that seriously. Have you noticed that some Christians, some people who, followers of Jesus, are joy impaired? Do you know these people? Yeah, they sing like, I got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. But it ain't anywhere else. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not in their face, it's not in their relationships, it doesn't show up anywhere else. And that's funny until it's not, and then I don't want to miss joy. I have a group of friends who they have this saying that we text to each other. I'm usually a recipient, not a initiator in this, but the group of friends, they send this text that says, don't let anyone steal your joy. Don't let anyone steal there are a lot of things and people and situations that can just steal. Sometimes it doesn't take very long in the morning. I wake up with joy and all of a sudden, shoom, there it goes. And so we text each other. They always text me at 5:30 every Sunday morning. And not that text necessarily, but don't let anyone steal your joy. Here's what's worse than letting someone steal your joy. Robbing yourself of joy. Think of that. You might be robbing yourself of one of the most important things in the experience of life. And we're going to learn how not to do that. Does that sound important? Yeah. Let's learn together. We're going to learn from David, not David Deming, our middle school director. He's great, but we're going to learn from King David in the Bible, who teaches us in this encounter he has with God. Actually, 2 encounters that he has with God. In one chapter of 2 Samuel, he teaches us so much about the experience and how not to miss seasons of joy and celebration in our lives. So let me give you a little background before we get to 2 Samuel, because it's going to center around these 2 encounters with God are centered around the ark of the Lord. You remember Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark? Yeah, exactly. That's Hollywood. This is the Bible version. There actually was an ark, and the ark represented the power and the presence of God. And in the Old Testament, in books of Samuel and Chronicles and Kings, you can see how God gives instruction, and then how the ark of the Lord is representing God's presence and God's power. And in fact, in 1 Samuel, before David shows up, they are trying to use the ark to help them in battle. So they're having this battle, the people of Israel having a battle with the Philistines, and it's not going great. It's kind of a stalemate. And so they go, let's bring in the ark, and that'll do the trick. And so they haul the ark into the battle, and guess what happens? They get clobbered. They lose, because that's not the way God works. God's not like a genie in a bottle that if you rub it the right way, he gives you your wishes. Or if you say the right things, if you stay away from that's not the way God works. And so they get clobbered by the Philistines in this battle. And the Philistines then take the ark. And they're like, sweet, we'll put that in our temple. And they have all sorts of bizarre gods. And they have statues to all of them in their temple. And they're like, here's another one. This is great. And they put the ark of the Lord in there. And it's the most bizarre story you'd ever read. You could go home and read it. All of their statues end up falling over and being crushed, like without anybody being in the building. And they come back and they're like, oh, snap. This thing, and they send it back. They're like, get this thing out of here. I don't know what's going on, but we don't want any part of this. And so they send the ark back to Israel, but it doesn't make it. It doesn't get all the way back. It stops at this guy's house named Abinadab. And you know who Abinadab is? Neither does anybody else. It's just a guy who, that's as far as the ark made it. And it stayed there for 20 years in his house, Abinadab. And we're going to pick up the story 20 years later. There's a new king, David, and David has won every battle. David has brought peace to the land. David is loved by all of the people in the kingdom. In other words, it is summertime for David. You see what I'm saying? He is experiencing the fruit of his kingship, and people love him. And that's where we're going to pick up the story, because he makes the decision at that point, hold on. We are going to miss out if we don't go get the ark and bring it back. And that's where we pick up the story. 2 Samuel, chapter 6, verse 1. 2 Samuel, chapter 6, verse 1. David, again, brought together all of the able young men of Israel, 30,000 of them. He and all his men went to Baalah in Judah to bring up the ark from there, the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim on the ark. They set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, there he is, which was on the hill. I guess that was Abinadab's address. Abinadab on the hill, that's all his letters say. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it. And Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord with castanets and harps and lyres and timbrels and sistrums, which I didn't know what they were. And then somebody in the first service has already emailed me and told me what a sistrum is. It's like a little Morocco thing. It's like a little shaker. And cymbals. Let's pause right here, because I don't want you to miss this first truth that David demonstrates for us. Recognizing and acknowledging God's presence produces joy. There's other things that might produce happiness that's circumstantial or emoting of rest or excitement. But the thing that produces joy is the presence of God. The presence of God, acknowledging and recognizing, experiencing it, produces joy. And David says, watch out, because you will, believe it or not, tend to forget to include God in everything when you don't really need him for anything. Right? When things are going great, we have the propensity to just forget to include God in everything that we do. We might give him a little lip service and go through the motions that we are used to, but it's not like when you don't need anything from God. David says that's the most important time that you can go and say, when I don't need anything from you. David doesn't need any blessings from God at this point. He needs God. He needs God's actual presence. And it may be the only time when you can tell, are you in this because of who God is or because of what God will provide for you? In summer, the season of plenty, might be the only time you can discern that. And David is very intentional. And he's like, we're going to go and we're going to bring the ark back because we're going to include God in everything that we celebrate. There is a joy that is produced when God's presence is there. And this is so different than just desiring for God to make your circumstances better. There's nothing wrong with that. But at some point you have to figure out, am I using God or am I worshiping God? And David tries to answer that question. Now, it takes a bizarre turn. And I thought about keeping this part out because we're dressed up like summer and it doesn't feel very summery. But I'm so convicted that this is maybe the thing that everybody needs to hear, including me, starting with me. So here's the turn. Ready? Verse 6. When they came, so they're carrying the ark, they're all celebrating, they're bringing the presence of God back. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore, God struck him down, and he died there beside the ark of God. That's the buzzkill of all the ages, right? I mean, can you imagine there's 30,000 people just celebrating, and all of a sudden, boom, that's it. And wow. Then David was angry because of the Lord's wrath that had broken out against Uzzah. And to this day, the place is called Perez Uzzah. And then, watch this. David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, how can the ark of the Lord ever come to me? How can the presence of God ever come to me? He was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David, named after him. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. Do you know who that is? Neither does anybody else. I'm telling you, he was just the dude whose house was like closest to where Uzzah died. And they were like, I don't know, give it to him. And so they gave the ark to this Obed-Edom fella. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom and the Gittite for 3 months, not like 20 years, but 3 months. And the Lord blessed him and his entire household. Now, that's a bizarre part of the story, but it does teach us this, that while recognizing God's presence produces joy, recognizing and acknowledging God's power produces awe, and I might say reverence, or fear in the best sense of the word. So let's unpack that together, because at first, and I've had this conversation with people who are like, that's exactly why I'm not a Christian. That's just terrible. That's maniacal. The dude like messes up one thing and God strikes him dead. I don't want to follow God like that. I totally get that. And here's what I would offer as the beginning of understanding is whenever there's something in the scripture, or quite frankly, God's activity in my life that doesn't make sense to me, I sometimes even out loud say these words. Just because it doesn't make sense to me right now doesn't mean that it doesn't make any sense. Just because it doesn't make sense to me right now doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't make any sense. I am limited in both my perspective, my knowledge, my wisdom. God is not. And so there's a lot of things about quantum physics that don't make any sense to me. It doesn't mean that they don't make any sense. It just means I haven't had the experience or the education or the perspective to make sense of them. So when I bump up against a place like this, or activities of God in my life that don't seem to make sense, I go, there's probably more to this story that maybe I'm unaware of. And so let me, with open hands, say, okay, what don't I know about what's going on here? And if you dig just a little bit, you'll find that God, when he gave the ark, gave these really specific instructions about what it was supposed to look like and how it was supposed to be transported, and always supposed to only be transported by these people who were the Levite priests, because they were the one who offered sacrifices on the altar in the temple. And they were always supposed to carry by these poles that went through these, metal rings, and they were supposed to be covered in gold. And a lot of the Old Testament is like that, if you read it. Like God gives all these instructions that you're like, that seems like too much already. What's with all the rules and stuff like that? And then you understand this, that God, from the beginning of the scripture, is working out a life-saving mission for the entire world. When sin enters the picture, God has a choice. Do I punt or do I redeem? And thank God, he starts this plan of redemption. But in the meantime, as the plan is getting worked out, You can't be in the presence of the holy God if you're not holy. It doesn't work that way. It's like when you flip on the lights. The darkness goes away. And so God's presence without God's power is useless to you. It's of no good. Who wants an unpowerful God? Please raise your hand. I'll give you a lot of them. They're a dime a dozen. No, you want a powerful God. And what is being played out in front of us here is that God knows what you and I need and desire, and knows there's only one way that you're going to get it. And so he gives these very specific instructions. And in another chapter in the Old Testament, God's glory comes down on a mountain, and he says to Moses, don't let anybody touch the mountain. Why? Because he's like a germaphobe or what? No. Because God's holiness will just annihilate unholy people. And we know you want the presence of God, but you also want the power of God at the same time. And so God told him exactly what to do to be safe for now. And that was to carry this thing in a very certain way. Did you notice how they were transporting the ark? Yeah, on a cart. I love that they call it twice. They go, it's a new cart though. Like that'll make it better. But God, we got you a new cart. And we didn't want you to use one of those old ones. That would be irreverent. We got you a new cart, God. And therein lies a picture of our pursuit of God. That I think I can just do it my way. But as long as my heart's in the right place, I think I'm fine. And this is God saying, oh, you're not even close to fine. And there goes Uzzah, boom, to say, this is how serious it is. The rules that I gave you aren't because I'm maniacal and power hungry. It's because I love you, because I have compassion on you, because I know what you need, and I know that you can't get it yet. And I know it's the most compassionate thing in the world to try to, when you can't explain to someone why this is going to be unhealthy, that you just try to prevent them from doing it, even though they don't understand it yet. But what we know that David didn't know was that God was on this plan, and he was going to take his presence and his power, and he was going to combine them. I'm giving you a hint as to where this happened. On the cross. Jesus took the presence of God and the power of God, and he brought them together, and it won't kill you anymore or me anymore because it killed him. He took our place so that we could have the power and the presence of God again. Okay, now that the story takes a great triumphant, celebratory ending. You ready for that? I said, are you ready for that? Yes. Okay, good. Yeah, let's stop talking about Uzzah, and here he goes. Now, King David was told, the Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom, and nobody even knows who he is, and everything he has because the ark of God. So David went to bring up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. Let's pay careful attention to how he does it. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. What is missing? What's different? There's no carts. Yeah, no carts anymore. David's like, oh, okay, I got it. When those who were carrying the ark had taken six steps, they sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. Wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sounds of trumpets. And as the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, he's dancing his head off. Michal, daughter of Saul, the previous king, watched from a window, and when she saw David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. They brought the ark of the Lord, set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it. And David sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before the Lord. And after he had finished sacrificing the burnt offerings and the fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord Almighty. And this last truth is that recognizing God's presence, experiencing it, brings joy. Recognizing God's power brings awe. And when you combine those, you know what you get? Celebration. You know what celebration feels like? It feels like the ability to express the joy that you've experienced for something that's beyond you. Unless you like to celebrate yourself, and at that point you should go see a counselor. But let's assume that you don't. And it's, you know, what's the thing that we celebrate most regularly for every person? Birthdays. Yeah, birthdays. Yeah. And which is an odd thing if you stop and think about it, because what did you do in order to be born? Not a lot, you know? So you didn't create yourself, and you don't sustain yourself. Like it's not up to you how many more birthdays you're going to have. But yet we celebrate your birthday, and it's so right that we do, because that's what celebration is. Celebration is saying, I'm the recipient of something just because of the goodness and the power of God. By the power of God, I came to be. I didn't have anything to do with it. And by the presence of God, I remain until he decides I don't need any more birthdays. And I'm going to celebrate that. It's not really about me. It's really about him. And so David dances his head off. And did you see the reaction of Michal, the daughter of Saul? She's like disgusted with him. She's like, that's beneath you to act like that in front of these people. And if you kept reading, David was like, I don't care. And David knew this much about the sacrifice of God that would provide his presence and his power at the same time. He believed, but it didn't happen yet. We see the whole picture of Jesus on the cross. And when you see that, if you see that, you will celebrate. It ain't got a thing to do about your circumstances. It has to do with the power and the presence of God that you are invited to be a part of. Now, I got a little taste of this kind of dancing last week. On Wednesday in Ghana, I was invited to speak to the back to school bash for the University of Ghana students. I don't know why they asked the old guy to speak to the young kids. That was their call. And while we were there, they had music and worship to start with. And all of a sudden, nobody was telling the students what to do. They started dancing, and good dancing. And I took a little video of it. You want to see it? It's a little short video. This is what happened. It's about 500 students there. And just out of nowhere, and these guys, look how good they are. They're just dancing, they're worship. And I'm standing on stage filming this, right? And I'm like, I got to go down there. I got to go dance. And so I put my phone down, and I went out, and I joined them. I didn't look exactly like they looked. Would you like to see that video? All right, take a look. Here's. Can you tell which one I am? Oh, hold on. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm like, okay, that's enough of that. Here's. Yeah. And there's something, I mean, that is so wrong to have a white man trying to dance like that. They called me white asofo. It was very funny. And I loved every minute of it. And there was something so good about that celebration. And so I don't want you to miss the season of celebration. And you know the last thing I'll say about celebration, it's a team sport. It's not really an individual thing that you do. And so maybe you're not in a season of plenty right now. We're going to get to your season, believe me. But you can celebrate. The scripture says, rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. And sometimes our selfishness goes, I'm not going to celebrate their good news. It's not theirs, it's yours too. The reason that we celebrate is because of the goodness and the power of God that is available to us, and it doesn't kill us. It gives us life.